Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the Storm Collectibles RYU from Street Fighter V. Now, say what you will about the game being a flop, this figure certainly is not. If you saw my video for Scorpion, you know that Storm knows what they're doing and they're implementing some really cool ideas, some pretty creative articulation, and just all around really awesome figures at a very fair price point. RYU is no different. He is a little bit different in terms of design though, so we do need to talk about a few things, and there are some things you may not even know about, so we need to talk about that as well. So let's go ahead and get him off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about 7¼ just shy of 7¼ inches, maybe 7⅛, which makes him just about just shy of 18 centimeters. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that is not 1/12 scale. The package says 1/12 scale. You're right, it's not. They decided to make the figures a little bit bigger so that they had some more room to work on the figures. They were a little more substantial and you really felt like you were getting your money's worth. While I do appreciate that, it is fair to point out that they are not 1/12 scale. And before we go on, I'm just going to pull out a couple other figures, just so that you have an idea of what size we're looking at. I think they are close enough that in any display you should be okay. So there's a Predator. He definitely towers over the Predator, or the Predator towers over him. And there is our Spider UK figure, which is just a little bit shorter than RYU. So it's worth noting that most of the 1/12 scale figures these days are not actually 1/12 scale. You'll notice Spider-Man is very close to the same size as RYU, so, or at least same height. RYU is very bulky. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's worth noting that it's not true to 1/12 scale, but it's not that far off, especially given the fact that other figures aren't in that scale accurately. So I wouldn't worry about it if I was you. It's something to note, but it's not that big of a deal. The last thing I want to compare is just the height against Scorpion. You'll see they're basically the same. So across their own line, you're not going to have any issues at all. But with Marvel Legends, you're going to have to just use a little tiny bit of creativity to make them the right size. So I think it's okay, but it's worth pointing out. Now, before we get into any more of the figure, let's talk about accessories. The first accessory I'll point out is the display stand. It's a very nicely sculpted and colored display stand. The base is really cool, and it has this kind of mechanical looking upright. It doesn't grant the greatest freedom in where you can move the arm. It basically just moves up and down, and then the clip itself rotates around and has a little bit of a hinge in it. And then the clip is spring loaded, and it holds the figure very nicely. But it will, it's not going to like go crazy and lean all the way over or anything like that. It's mostly straight up and down, but it is very solid, so that's a good thing. We do have some interchangeable faces. We have the neutral face that comes on him in the package, the one where his teeth are showing, and then one where his mouth is fully open like he's yelling. We have a few hands, quite a few hands. We have the two fist hands that come on him in the package, two kind of martial arts hands, two relaxed hands, and then two hands that are for doing the Hadoken. So speaking of the Hadoken, we have that. It actually has two parts, one where it's a standard Hadoken and then one to make it a little bit more super, and that kind of snaps in place, and the super part has a little bit of the yellow on there, so that's really cool. It's worth noting that the Hadoken does not require an individual display stand because it does snap into his fingers, and while it is kind of heavy and you might have to work on balancing a little bit, he can hold it up, so that's pretty cool. If you have any questions about any of these parts, you can go ahead and check the instruction booklet that comes with him, though it's all pretty self-explanatory. One last thing to mention is that you've probably seen him in photos without the top of his gi on, without his shirt, and you can take it off. However, in order to do that properly, you have to pull off the arms. So it's not necessarily something that's recommended. It's why it's not in the booklet. But if you want to do it, you can pull off the arms and show him without the gi. It's all sculpted and everything underneath, and the arms are just a ball peg that goes inside. But be careful. It's also worth noting, and we'll talk about this, or you'll be able to see it a little bit more when I get to the articulation. This piece right here is just another floating cap that hides the gap where the arm moves around. If you want to bring his arms all the way across, like they do in like the Street Fighter cover art, you can do that, but you have to remove those pieces, and then you'll be able to bring that butterfly part of his arms all the way forward, and you can cross his arms in front of his chest a little bit more. But you don't need to do it for the Hadoken, although it might be helpful. It's up to you. You'll have to play around with it and see what you're comfortable doing. I have pulled the arms off on this guy and on Scorpion, and nothing broke, but anytime you're dealing with a pressure fitting and you have to pull stuff apart, you really want to use some caution and be careful. Okay, so let's get into the figure. As far as the paint goes, it's definitely Street Fighter V. His gi is very dirty looking. It's got this really nice wash going on. I like it. I was a little bit worried it was going to be too much, but in hand it looks really nice. So I'm very happy about that. His belt is a nice darkish black or darkish gray, almost black, with a little bit of dry brushing on top. And you can make out the kanji down here, so that's cool. The gloves are nicely painted with a wash and then some dry brushing, and you can see the logo on the wrist part. That's nice. All of the skin tone has some nice shading throughout, and it is a nice tone on its own, so that's cool. And then we have the hair. I can't tell if the hair has shading or not. It might just be shadows, but either way, it looks good. And the face, I think, is it's painted really nicely. I like that. The eyes look good. Everything looks good, but I have two issues with the face. One is the way the faces are interchangeable. The eyebrows actually go over the headband. So that's not very realistic at all. And then there's a little bit of skin tone on the tops of the eyebrows, so that makes it kind of takes away the realism. It doesn't look right. So I do wish that they didn't have the eyebrows over the headband, because it's just not possible in real life. I know some of the artwork shows RYU like that, but it's not my cup of tea. And as far as the likeness goes, I think it's pretty good. It's not 100% spot on, but once you get him in hand, it looks way better than a lot of the earlier photos. So I'm pretty happy with it. As far as the articulation on this guy, there's something that's really cool, and unfortunately it doesn't work that well, but the concept is there, so hopefully it gets carried forward. His head is on, as you can see, let me pull that off. You can see there's a ball peg for his head itself. The thing is, that peg that's going down goes all the way down into the chest, because this neck, well, the whole chest, but this neck right here is soft plastic. So the idea is that you can lean him around and it's going to move the neck with it and look really awesome. The problem is the peg is not stiff enough and the neck is just a little bit too stiff that it doesn't actually allow for the motion. So it's a really cool concept. It just doesn't actually function the way they had intended. So yes, that's disappointing, but you do still get the ball peg and you can move the head mostly just on a swivel, but you can lean it a little bit here and there. So it's not perfect, but it's still pretty cool. And then the ties back here are on a peg, so you can move those around as you need to, so that's cool. Speaking of which, this looks like it's on a peg also. I don't know if you guys can see that. I think you can. It doesn't really want to rotate, and I can't tell if I can pull on it or not, so I'm not going to mess with it. It doesn't say anything about it in the directions, but it looks like it should rotate. I'm not sure though, so you're going to have to experiment with yours. I haven't tried pulling on it too much because I'm afraid I'll tear it. But it looks like it can pose. We'll get to the shoulders in a second. For the torso, we do have a ball peg just like on Scorpion. RYU's clothing is a lot tighter to his body and it's a lot thicker, so you don't have quite as much range out of him as you do for Scorpion. But as you play with it, you can lean him back a little bit and lean him forward and then lean him side to side. Leaning side to side works pretty well, but again, it's going to mostly all look like he's not leaning because the clothing just kind of moves with him. Then you have another ball peg for the torso, which allows everything to move around. You're going to get most of your leaning out of that, really, because that peg really just goes down to the T-joint that goes into the hips. So there's a peg going across here with a ball peg for each hip, and then it's a T, so it goes up into the lower torso. So the whole thing can move around on that, which works really well. It's just this upper one is kind of stiff, doesn't give you the best range. So let's talk about the shoulders. Like I mentioned, we have a ball peg that goes all the way into the torso, like right around here. So you get really good range out of the whole arm. This is just a floating cap that hides all of that. And then you have your ball hinge out here, which gives you all of your traditional range, which works really well. I love that. You have your bicep swivel, which is no problem at all. Your double jointed elbow. It only gives you a little bit better than 90, but I think that's okay. And it does look really good, so I'm very happy about that. And then one thing I'm also very happy about is that for the hands, or for the wrists, we have a ball peg connected to our wrist hinge, which I don't think any company does. I haven't seen that I can remember. It's normally just a straight peg and a straight peg, but now we have a ball peg and then a straight peg on the other side of the hinge. So you can move that arm around or the hand around very well using the hinge and also using that ball peg. It gives you a little bit of extra range, and this part obviously hides the joint. On top of all of that, the hands are nice and soft. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm able to swap the hands out very easily, and it works very well, so I love that. I mentioned that this is kind of restrictive, and it is, but it is a nice soft plastic, so it won't get in the way of the legs where it comes down here. The legs are actually just like Scorpion's. They're just on a ball socket with a swivel around that socket, so you can bring the legs pretty far up. Not quite as far as Scorpion, just because Ryu's got the baggy pants and he's a lot bulkier, but you can get the leg almost all the way forward, so that's pretty cool. It will go back quite a ways, not a ton, but probably enough, and then going out to the side. Again, not quite as good as Scorpion, but still, that's pretty good. I think you have pretty good range there, so I like that. And then, of course, you do have your thigh swivel, which helps a lot. This piece right here is just a floating soft piece, so it's not going to get in the way of anything, so that's fine. And then for the knees, we have the double jointed knees. His are a lot stiffer than Scorpion's, but you don't get the best range out of the knees. They're just a little bit better than 90, which is enough, but it's not the best. I'm thinking as they go forward, because this is obviously one of their first few figures like this, they're going to be able to tweak things and get them even better, but it's still really good. And then for the ankles, we do have a shin swivel. If you want that, you have that. But then you have the hinge and then a ball peg for the actual foot. So just like Scorpion, only not quite as effective because, again, Ryu's a lot bulkier. You can kind of offset the foot to bring it a little bit farther forward, or you can offset it the other way to bring it a little bit farther back. So you get pretty good range out of all of that. The only range that's not great is the ankle rocker. You don't get that much. It just pops off if you go too far. So you have the ball peg in there, but you don't have that much ankle rocker, barely any. So that's a bit disappointing. The toe hinge, I think, is a little bit better than Scorpion's, but still close. It's close. So I think what the thing to take away from these guys is they're fantastic, but they're not perfect. So don't buy it thinking it's going to be perfect. Buy it thinking it's going to be really damn good, and that's what it is. You do have some issues. You can see mine has a little bit of a scratch mark on his chest right there. I don't know if that's from the packaging or what, but for the price point, they are easily a great value. They're really, really great figures. I love posing them, love handling them. Everybody I know that's purchased one, they can't put it down. They're just super impressed, and I'm the same way. The tiny issues that do exist are not anywhere near deal breakers, and I think they're going to end up getting worked out as they continue the line. So I am fully confident in this line of figures at this point. You can just see they look fantastic. You can tell they're made by a company that actually cares about what they're making, and that's why you're getting them at such a good price point. They're basically like the NECA of imports. Lots of hand sculpted, really nice care put into the figure, and you're getting a ton of accessories, tons of articulation, tons of figure for a really fair price. So I'm super happy about it. These guys will be hitting store shelves very soon, and by store shelves I mean online shelves. So check out Big Bad Toy Store. The link is in the description. It's one of their official places. It's really just Big Bad Toy Store and the Storm website itself. So that's where you want to buy it. I would go Big Bad Toy Store because if you're in the US, you'll be getting it shipped from there rather than from Storm, but that's up to you. You can do whatever you want to do. So there it is, guys. I definitely recommend it 100%. Love this line of figures. Very excited to see where they go in the future. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games. We stream 3 nights a week, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you turn on notifications, and in the meantime, keep collecting.